Hello and welcome to the latest Business of the Business podcast. I am your co-host, JP John Poz from the Two-Man Power Trip. Of course, joining me is the financial wrestling genius himself, the Doctor, Lavie Margolin. How you doing today, Lavie?
I'm doing great, John. A very special opportunity for us. Allison Lynn Miller of the forthcoming wonderful book, although I'm cool enough to have it already. It's called Rough House, A Father, a Son, and the Pursuit of Pro Wrestling Glory is joining us today. I've been fortunate to have been connected with Allison for a couple of years and have been aware of the research that she was doing on this book. Through my Google News alerts, have come across her articles. And she's not only from pro wrestling, I'm going to mess up the names, but she's written for some very interesting publications. I think what was called Gardens and Guns. Allison, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
How bad did I mess up the magazine name?
You just added an S. It's okay.
Okay, Garden and Guns or
Yeah.
Gardens and Guns?
Garden and gun. Yep.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. Getting a story on Garden and Gun's website about professional wrestling was a victory worldwide. I should say, it's not something they would usually cover.
Well, backyard wrestling, and if you're allowed to carry, then
Yeah.
there's something
Yeah,
there.
exactly.
So, Allison, I'm just curious, like, where did you grow up, and basically, how did you discover wrestling wherever you grew up? Because I'm obviously Northeast WWF guy. My dad liked wrestling, so it's like it kind of makes sense for me. But what about for you? Where, as far as did you grow up, and where did you find wrestling?
Yeah, I grew up in a little town called Hartwell, Georgia. I live in Athens, Georgia now. Hartwell's about an hour away. And I didn't know it. I wasn't into wrestling as a kid more so than the average, child of the late 80s, early 90s when wrestling was at its peak. Obviously, it was everywhere. But I didn't know it, but there's been these small indie wrestling shows happening all over the state for as long as anyone can remember. Hartwell included, but especially just down the road, Cornelia, Georgia, where the famous Landmark Arena is about an hour from where I live currently. So my experience with wrestling was that it was just kind of this thing I knew about, right? But I didn't really know much about. Was never really into it. The way that I got into it was that I went to a local wrestling show here in Athens in 2019, just as on a whim, something to do. It was at a local brewery that I liked. I got some friends together. We went, and I remember standing in that room and just being able to feel the connection between the fans and the performers. And everyone was plugged in a way that I don't recall ever experiencing anywhere else. And then I was plugged in, I was, by the end of it, I was screaming at the ring, and it was just like this almost like out of body experience. And I was just so compelled by the power of what was happening in the ring, the power that it had over all the people around it. And it was fun. It was thrilling. It was fun. I could sense that a lot of people knew each other there. And I was interested. I wanted to know everything. So as a writer and reporter, all the beeps and the lights started flickering in my mind. But like any good procrastinating writer, I didn't do anything about it for several months. It wasn't until toward the end of that year, that I really started reporting on it, and that began with just reaching out to the person who was running that show, which at the time was called Southern Violence in Wrestling. It's no longer. Well, I'm pretty sure it's no longer. It kind of disbanded, and the promoters went two different ways. Now, one of them runs Classic City Wrestling here in Athens, which is a really cool promotion. They pair live music with their wrestling shows at a famous Athens, Georgia music venue. um, but anyway, the first page of my book takes place in November of 2019.
When you do that, right? When you're focusing in on wrestling, are you really a fan more so even now, or as you're writing the book, does it make you more of a fan?
Yes. So I would say, one thing I'll tout your podcast. I was just this morning listening to the episode with the guy from Pittsburgh. You may have to remind me of his name. Was it Tom?
Tom Ligurdy, if I'm
Ligger.
pronouncing it
Yeah.
correctly. Yeah.
um, what he said really resonated with me, which is the power of indie wrestling. So smaller shows to me, that's what I love. That's what I love. And like you, Lavi, you talked about taking your son, I think it was, to a big WWE show. I have a 12-year-old daughter. She was I guess she was 5 or 6 when I started this. She came along on quite a few of my reporting trips, meaning going to shows, she and my husband. And I remember the very first show that I took her to, she didn't have any background of what wrestling was. But I told her when the workers were coming out, I said, look, they're gonna attack each other, they're gonna hit each other, they're gonna bleed. They're okay. They're gonna be okay after the show. And it was like as soon as she understood that, she was all in. And then she was yelling at them. The biggest heckler I know, right? So but like you, Lavi, I took her to AEW when they were here in Athens. And we had kind of cheap seats also, pretty far away from the ring. And she fell asleep. It was like, so
Wow.
what I'm a fan of is these small shows. I love being right up close to the ring. I mean, when I was doing some of the venues that I went to in Georgia as I was reporting the book are really small. I remember one show called PCW used to run in this space that was like an old hardware store. And their seats were church pews, old church pews. Well, one time a wrestler came flying out of the ring, hit the pew, and the one in front of me fell down. And it was like, I learned pretty quickly that you have to stay, you got to pay attention to what's going on in the ring, or else you're going to, you get hit in the face. So yeah, I became a fan of indie wrestling. I don't really follow the big promotions very much. And I found that actually the people that I was interacting with at this level, they followed them, of course, but they're just so much more invested in the indie wrestling where they're performing.
So how do you like get the idea? Like, okay, I like wrestling. I kind of like, I love going to like the live experience. I like indies. How do you turn that into, oh, I want to, maybe some little journalism. Let's turn this into writing a book. How do you kind of get to that direction?
Well, my background is in journalism. I've been a writer for my whole career. And what I found interesting in wrestling and what I knew could make it a book was not so much about who won, who lost, surface level facts about wrestling. It was the depth and the meaning that it held for the people involved, both the fans and the performers, the people who put on the shows. It didn't take me long to realize that wrestling was really a lifeline for a lot of people, whether they were, working their day jobs 9 to 5 and then being able to kind of leave work on Friday and change into their tights in the back of a truck, and then hit the ring, or if they were fans and they, wrestling on the local level served as kind of community theater. It's kind of like a cross between community theater and church fellowship, if that makes sense. People come to these shows religiously. They see each other, they care for each other. I just saw some really meaningful relationships, and I heard over and over again a couple of things. One is that, without wrestling, I don't know where I'd be in as that kind of reflection of a lot of people had somewhat rough lives or came from rough households, and wrestling was a way for them to depart from that. I loved the magic of how you could be anyone from anywhere, and then when you get in the ring, you can be anyone from everywhere. You get to decide who you are in the ring. I love the depth of it, and I felt like it hadn't been mined yet on this level. There's a lot of good wrestling books out there, but I didn't feel like anyone had told this story yet.
I'm going to hand it over to Lavie. I know Lavie's chomping at the bit. He's got a lot of good questions.
Of course. But Alison, as you were talking, and you were talking about your daughter falling asleep, my wife was brave enough to come to a WWE show once, and she fell asleep. We were in the bad seats in Madison Square Garden, although she did go to the independent show, the first independent show that I took my son. It was at a VFW hall. In Yonkers. I don't know if that means anything, but it was a very small show, and where you were allowed to is veteran, so they're allowed to smoke. He was going to tell them no. In New York State, you're not supposed to do that. So it had that context. She did enjoy it too. So it really depends on the context. Now, my 15-year-old daughter, there's no way she will attend a wrestling show. Although with a book coming out called Focus on the outfits of wrestlers. She's a fashion designer.
Okay.
She actually goes to a high school of fashion design and art. So maybe she'll look at it for 5 minutes. So we'll try there. So one of the interesting things just to learn about is just reflecting back even into the late 90s, pre-McFoley's Have a Nice Day book. My dream was always to go to a bookstore and find books about wrestling. Now, I did wrestle amateur, not that well, but it wasn't exciting to see a book about how to wrestle, right? So one of the only books you could find was the $1 Million Man's first very thin book. And one of the books that you mentioned, which I actually thought about immediately when I started reading your book, was Sharon Mazur's book. I think she had a couple editions of them because I think I remember reading it earlier than 1998. But that was really that sociological look, focused on Johnny Rod's school and wrestling at the time. All that being said, so 25 years later, or even more, almost 30 years later, wrestling books are well established. But I think for the most part, only a certain type, those that are most risk averse, meaning I'm very famous, I'm going to write a book. What's the risk to a Big Five or major publisher? Whereas a journalistic look that goes beyond, that's not focused on a particular name, like a Vince McMahon, and it's more like a sociological look in the business. That's completely appealing, of course, to us and our audience. But I'd imagine something where a big publisher might need to be educated on it. So what was that process like? What challenges did you encounter? And how did you find the right publisher for you?
Yeah, well, here's one thing I've learned, which is that being a writer is a lot like being an indie professional wrestler in that it is very hard. It's very hard. You're in the business of selling yourself constantly. And it was difficult to sell this book. So I have an agent in New York, and very lucky to have him. He understood immediately what I was going for with this book and was crucial in the process of me determining who the central characters would be and kind of the narrative arc of the book. But I spent a year writing the book proposal. We sent it out to maybe 30 of the different imprints at all the Big Five publishers. We got a lot of really gracious no's. I heard a lot of wrestling fans don't read, which I think is not true. I think there's this just decades old, just tired, stereotype about wrestling fans, and it's just totally not true. But for some reason, especially in the Northeast, forgive me, it persists, and I'm sure you encounter it too. But there was, it's not a book about wrestling. It is. Wrestling is the facade. It's the infrastructure of the story. It's where it takes place. But it's about family. It's about finding meaning in your own life. It's about different definitions of success. It's about so many other things. And so the people that understood the book and saw what it could be. So my publisher is Norton in New York as well. They're an independent publisher. They do a ton of nonfiction. Traditionally, they're more kind of academically minded. They have a lot of very smart people writing a lot of very smart books that I'm really, sometimes I wonder how I ended up there. But the editor who, was a champion of the proposal, he got it. He read the proposal. He knew what it could be. But it took a while, he at first he couldn't even sell it to the editorial board. So it was 6 months later that finally happened. So, I started reporting on this in 2019. The book comes out in January of 2026, just to show you the scope of this project.
No, that's amazing. I remember with Trump Mania, the first edition well, they both ended up being independently published, which I was fine with. But the first edition was independently published. It had some momentum. I signed a deal with Hollywood to do a podcast there. Thankfully, it did not work out, as John and I are continuing to work together so many years later. But I was like, this is an opportunity. Let me go. And I actually found someone who was interested. I went up, the big elevator, and, you see all of Manhattan from the windows. And I was like, I can't believe I'm here. And he actually did champion it, whatever. But it was just a fun, interesting process. So in terms of, creating roots in the business and so on, we know that kayfabe doesn't exist for the most part anymore. Some still believe. But I think there is that perception, maybe more so in New York, but overall, where when journalists come to wrestling, it's usually one of two things. One is like it's a puff piece. It's, WWE is here, or everyone had a great time at the fair, and we raised money for the whatever American Eagles Club, whatever. Or it's meant to trash, look down, make fun of, and so on. So, how did you go about establishing trust? What resistance did you find, and what was a key connection?
Yeah. Well, I had a really formative. My first interview that I did at the start of this project was with a wrestler named Justin Legend here in Athens, Georgia. He's now the promoter of Classic City Wrestling. We sat at a coffee shop for probably an hour and a half, and he just broke everything down for me. I said, I don't know anything, but I'm really interested. And he was really honest with me, and just gave me the full scope of wrestling as he experienced it as a kid growing up in the 80s, and and how it had served him as an adult. And then I was kind of off to the races. So and I spent so many hours and so many Saturday nights away from home. I just showed up and I stuck around, because as a journalist, you don't know when something's going to happen or when it's not, right? You got to be lucky enough to be in the room when something happens. I cared about the people I was talking to. I wanted to hear their stories. It wasn't as if I was an out of town writer coming and kind of helicoptering in to be, have a transactional story. I knew that this was going to be something bigger. I didn't know then what that might be, but I think that's how I earn trust, is that I talk to tons of people. I talk to so many more people than even I could fit into the book. And I showed up and I cared. And they let me in. I mean, I was so grateful that everyone was so willing to share their stories, and there's just so many compelling stories out there and interesting characters. It's really a writer's dream.
With the independents, sometimes when people ask, can I hang around? They're like, yeah, can you set up the chairs, run the popcorn? Did anyone ask you to go beyond, expectations or the scope there?
I'm trying to think if I ever put away chairs or set up. I definitely never helped set up the ring or anything, but I was also frequenting the same handful of places, so people did get to recognize me, and I would the first time you go into a place, it's like no one knows who you are. Maybe people are a little more guarded, but after several months and years, it was like they got used to seeing me.
So, and you'll share the names of the people as you'd like in terms of the central characters of the book. They're just escaping me at the moment. But when I was reading about them, I found them so interesting that I went on Facebook and I started following them. Even though they're public profiles and it's somewhat promotional, I kind of feel like, should I be following? I kind of feel like I know a lot about their lives now, and by following them on Facebook, maybe I'm learning too much. Or when I see them in a picture, on a date or whatever, maybe it's like, oh, okay, is this what happened? Where when I sort of trying to piece it together. So how did you find your central characters, and do you follow them on Facebook, and does that continue the story for you?
Yeah, this is another great thing about writing about wrestling, is that wrestlers are performers. They're in the business of self-promotion. Everything they do is on Facebook, so if I wasn't able to go somewhere, and I wasn't sure what had happened over the weekend, all I got to do is go on Facebook and I can find out, right? It's also where, in the modern age of indie wrestling, a lot of the drama unfolds on social media, like that's where the promos are, and they're attacking each other on Facebook. It's all part of the storyline, of course, most of the time. So yeah, the central characters, there was, like I said, there were so many people that had compelling stories. What I loved about Hunter James, who's the young wrestler that is the anchor of the book, and his father. I met Hunter when he was 16 in the backyard. He was bouncing around the ring in someone's backyard. And again, at the time, I didn't know I was going to write a book. I didn't know he was going to be in it. But I was lucky enough that I recorded some video that day and took a lot of notes. So that's the opening scene of the book, actually. But he, as far as writing goes, he's a great character because he's young. He's kind of at the beginning of his trajectory. He's rife for setback. Something is bound to happen to him that he has to overcome. So in terms of narrative storytelling, that checked all the marks. I had access to him. He was, he wasn't holding anything back, and he wanted to talk to me. Now, in terms of his father, that was a little more of a struggle. At first, his father did not want to talk to me at all. When you read the book, or when your listeners read the book, they'll discover that there was a little bit of a fracture in their relationship related, and that is with wrestling at the root of that. So there was a point that I wasn't sure I was going to get access to Billy Ray, Hunter's father, and I was really worried about that because father-son, parent-child stories are universal, and I knew that I couldn't write the book as well without having access to him, but time kind of healed the wounds, and he came around. So it worked out. Yeah.
I think one of the parts that, was just, I don't know, fortuitous, it just geographically, it just made a lot of sense and worked out really well, was that, it centers around the Landmark Arena before it closes. And to me, that was always a place of fascination, going back to the late 90s with, Bill Behrens, who I think is, one of the central connections that you made. There's sort of a theory that's sort of like what ushered in, the modern wrestling, if you go from AEW 2019 to present, was that like post Attitude Era, where in the Northeast, right, like you had Ring of Honor, but in the Southeast, the Wild Side, that style with AJ Styles and Air Paris, like that was really a central element of things. What's really cool, and this is just an aside, like Air Paris follows me on X, and he works for like an optical store now. So it's just cool, like just because I had found one of the articles like through Google Alerts and just shared, and I guess he found he searches his name. Why not? Once in a while, and like then he connected to me. But
yeah.
I wasn't like a tape trader or anything like that. But in New York, just for a few weeks, there was like a cable station that was transitioning, so they had one of the low power stations that would air Wild Side, and I saw like AJ Styles, I think Wrestling Air Paris, something like that. So it really traveled. So all that's to say, like, how central was the Landmark Arena, and if you can give us like a visual, the way I imagine is it's like a one room near, almost now it's condemned, but nearly condemned schoolhouse. Was there like functional bathrooms in there? What type of place was it?
It's a shithole, and no one will be offended by that because everyone knows that. But it's like this holy shithole. So it's, I mean, it's what it is. It's a former school gymnasium. There is one working bathroom, or there was. I was fortunate enough that I was there for the very last show. And again, this goes back to showing up and not knowing what's going to happen. It was Christmas night. I left my family and I went to the Landmark Arena, and it was completely packed. It was freezing that night. Actually, the pipes burst. The bathroom was not working that night. People had to go to the gas station across the street. That ended up being the last show there ever. And how lucky was I to be able to be there taking notes and talking to people and experience this magical gathering of people that was just, I mean, the house was packed. It's actually burning up in there because they were running these huge like propane heaters. But I remember also the first time I went there, it was like there's no parking lot. It stands at the corner of this crossroads, and it's just, Cornelia is a decent sized town, but it's kind of on the outskirts of it. It's something you could drive right by without noticing it, except for there's this like old beat up letter sign that has says pro wrestling Saturday nights on it, and there's always a few letters missing, that kind of thing. But the floor it's gritty. It's it's kind of this juxtaposition of fabulousness and grit, because you walk in and it's just kind of like this beat down place, but then there's just like the stage lights that are shining over the ring, and then the wrestlers come out and they're all shined up and everything's sparkling, and I loved that. But yeah, it was it's what I learned was it meant so much to so many people, and it's you named a couple of people that had performed there, but the way I put it in the book is like no wrestler would say no to performing here, right? At past, present, anything. It's kind of like a stepping stone on the way to any wrestler's journey to success, or to just any part of their career. Some wrestlers really strive to make it to the WWE and never do, but they really they love performing on the indies, and it's just such a meaningful place. And I talked to a few people after it did officially close. There was a kind of a gathering of wrestlers, like an open house to kind of people could say their goodbyes, and it kind of like just hits you, like, wow, there's just not that many places in the world that hold that power over such a wide group of people.
Yeah, I think what's fun about wrestling, you've sort of alluded to it, is like the type of venues that it could be in. One of my favorite in Brooklyn, before it was condemned or sold or whatever, it was called the Lyceum, and it was an old time like bathhouse.
Oh.
And like you go down the stairs and you're just like, where am I? But it was perfect for wrestling.
Yeah.
So being that this is the business of the business, and one of the topics that's carried through from the top of the independents, including Game Changer Wrestling, Brett Lauderdale, one of our most prolific guests, who isn't afraid to admit as well, business is down, in independent wrestling. But I think each area sort of has its own thing. I don't know if necessarily people that are going Saturday night in Athens are like worried about like, who just signed what deal or whatever, but like going for a number of years, have you seen a change in the business of independent wrestling, and sort of what's the state of it in Georgia now?
So I think Georgia has always been flush with independent promotions, but the thing is that they will come and go. Someone told me once that after people get their tax refunds, there's like this influx of new promotions, and then they're gone by the next year. So, but there's a handful that have just been around for a long time. Like I spent a lot of time at this one called Southern Fried Championship Wrestling there in Monroe. Obviously other ones like Deep South Wrestling is flourishing again. It kind of comes in waves. And I think anyone who knows anything about wrestling knows that there's not money to be made. I mean, it's just by the time that you rent the space and you rent the ring and you pay the wrestlers, it's just like, that's really not what it's about at this level. So I would say it's still thriving, but it's always in this state of flux. But I think you could live anywhere in this state and you're never more than an hour drive from a good indie wrestling show.
So I have two questions before I turn over to John. The first is a little bit darker, but hopefully it, sort of like with the idea of like helping things in the future. Yeah. And the second is more positive. So the darker question first. I think just because of the volume of wrestling coming out of Georgia, that's probably why we see more cases of it. But just in the last few years alone, there's been 4, whether it's incidents or people with, sexual predator backgrounds that are around the business, or they themselves have been accused currently and so on. Just observing the business, have you noticed like, okay, I think maybe there should be some best practices here in terms of separating, like especially on the independent scene, separating the fans from the wrestlers and the interaction, like sort of if somebody were to ask you for guidance, like is there a better way of doing things just so that we can avoid these type of situations, in the future?
Yeah, I never really thought about that. I will say that at this level, it is very it's it's kind of freewheeling and open. I mean, there are security guards, but um, you know, I for instance have had never had any issue kind of just walking. If you act like you're supposed to be there, most of the time you can just walk right into the locker room. Um, so I don't know. I mean, I don't know about best practices. I feel like that's kind of what makes it awesome is that there's I don't know, there's that those don't exist, I guess, but also if people are getting hurt or abused, that's also not good. So yeah, I'm not really sure.
Sure. Yeah, it's I think one that hasn't been solved in
Yeah,
125 years in America, so
yeah,
we can't solve it
yeah.
today.
Hmm.
Um, but on a positive note, I mean, first the challenge is that I think a fair amount of the people that you profiled either they in a traditional sense I work for a college and I just got a doctoral degree as my name says at the bottom, so like
Yeah,
part of me is sort of like thinking about like education opportunity and career growth and vocational development and so on, so we have a very like traditional view of that. um but at the other time, like there's something to be said about like living your best life, like you do something 9 to 5 or part-time or whatever, or your housing may be unstable, but like on Friday night, you're like the happiest person in the world because you get to be cheered or booed or put on a costume and so on. And I think that was like a very positive thing to see. And that was sort of like a theme that came out to me. Like, so was that like one of your main things that you walked away with? Like people are just living their best life.
yeah. That was, I think, one of the very early things that I caught on to was that, you know, kind of going back to what I said in the beginning is like wrestling is I don't want to say it's therapy, but it's a release, you know? It's like it I feel like everyone should be doing it. I feel like we should never stop play fighting. I mean, you have children, it's like kids love to throw each other around and not hurt each other, you know? There's just magic in that. And I don't know at what point why we have to stop doing that. I guess because when you're old, it does hurt. but but I just feel like it's just it's so good for people to be able to do that. And then you know this is all of this, everything that happens in the ring is bound by trust, and that is very meaningful. I mean, like you're getting in the ring with someone, you are risking your life. And, you know, you could get hurt, you could get paralyzed, but this trust here I just found so moving. And everyone that I talked to told me that they're better people because they do this. Um, and that's really what the book is about. Yeah.
So as far as where everybody can find the book and find you on as far as social media, give us all your plugs just as far as the book and you
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah. So here's the book. Comes out January 20th. You can pre-order it now from anywhere that you like, preferably your local, your nearest local bookstore. I am going on a book tour. I think I've got 14 cities, mostly in the South and Texas. Columbus, Ohio is as close as I'm going to get to you guys as far as I know right now. But my website is AlisonLynnMiller.com. It's one L and one N. And same thing on Instagram and Facebook. So that's where I'll be, you know, promoting tour dates and stuff. But yeah, I love hearing from people. I really am excited to get this out into the world, and would love to hear what people think. So definitely reach out to me. Would love to see obviously as many people as possible on tour.
Allison, thank you so much for all the time today. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Thanks so much. Take care and have a wonderful book tour.
Thanks. Same to you.
Thank you, Allison. Good luck.
Bye.
All right, Lavie, let's get to the news. What is the latest? What is going on with your favorite company of all time, Triller?
Yeah, no, now that it's sort of now that it can't be traded by the public, it's just institutional training, as far as I understand it. Like you'll see the numbers bounce around all over the place once you're at the cents level. That's not surprising. So when I took a screenshot, it was at 1.8 cents, and now it's at like 3 cents or whatever it may be. So like, if you're able to trade it, you can either lose a lot or make a lot quickly, potentially. I'm not even sure who's actually trading it at this point. But something that I wanted to look at that perhaps gives a little bit more insight into the issue is sort of companies that have been in this situation before, who has survived and now is like a big company again. So just like, often when you hit a market like this, you kind of think about it like maybe it's the end or whatever it may be. So Hertz Global, Super Microcomputers, American Airlines, let's see who else, Burger King. I had no idea. So how did these companies recover? Fixed the root issues, strong underlying business momentum. Sometimes it was through bankruptcy protection or private equity involvement. Heart Media, radio broadcasting company, and Sirius did not go into such a situation, but they were very close to being there. So that's probably the closest in terms of like media. So I would say a long road ahead for them. Maybe a long road ahead if they do recover. If they don't recover, it might not be a long road ahead. We haven't seen yet the strain on Triller Plus, as a number of shows announced for WrestleMania weekend.
Now, as far as WrestleMania weekend, that's a perfect segue to the collective. What is going on with the collective?
Yeah, so I think as independent wrestling struggles, there's not as many touch points anymore. But the collective, of course, it does well in terms of attendance, and I'd assume it's one of the most watched wrestling weekends on Triller. But it just sort of puts the spotlight on a number of companies beyond Game Changer Wrestling. So one of the most interesting ones is promotion through New Japan. The Death Vegas. John, I don't know this performer as well. Deathspay, I guess does like deathmatch type wrestling or hardcore type wrestling through New Japan. So it's not exactly a New Japan show, but it's kind of through them. And then I was wondering, like, okay, they have these other relationships, but they're still having a show with Dragon Gate. So interesting politics there. Progress Wrestling will be there. An MDK branded event, MDK Fight Club, and the Juggalos are going to be there. So continuing the relationship in a unique way. Stranglemania, Viva Las Vegas. That poster looks pretty cool. Of course, this is a collaboration with WrestleCon. So Wednesday, Pottermania, Dragon Gate, Hybrid Wrestling. Thursday, Progress, March Hitchcock Memorial, Death Vegas, MDK. Friday, Gringo Locos, World on Lucha, Bloodsport, Spring Break, Juggalo Wrestling, and Saturday, Effie's Big Gay Brunch, and Joey Janelle, Spring Break, The Immortal Cluster, So who is not there? Defy, at least under this collective umbrella, right? Defy, DDT, Tokyo Joshi Pro, For the Culture, and there's not, I believe, a show branded as GCW versus the World, and there's not a Jim Lloyd branded show. Obviously, there's only so many slots, but interesting to see some of the past staples, are not there this year as they make room for others.
Collective could be a good one. You never know. But what about New Japan Pro Wrestling? Obviously, Tanahashi is the man. We know that, but there is no more Tanahashi. So what's going on with New Japan?
Yeah, so we're still sort of in that afterglow. So looking back on Wrestle Kingdom, Tanahashi announced that it was watched live by 155,000 people. Post Wrestling had a good breakdown of what may have happened and so on. So it aired on TV Asahi, but they also have a digital or secondary station that aired the whole show. Nationwide broadcast later was watched by 3.5 million people, the most successful Wrestle Kingdom ever. So no matter what happens, it's certainly very successful. we were talking about, well, will they be back in America soon? We know about the Newark show, so that's 1,185. But then they have a G1 Climax 36 show at the Now Arena in Chicago in July. And Tony Khan has said that AEW talent may be on it. So we'll see how much support that they get there. Speaking of AEW and New Japan, so in advance of that, Yota Tsuji was interviewed on the New Japan website. And it said, do you see this as being a cross-promotional match of sorts with Takeshita triple contracted? Well, I don't want to lose to AEW. I don't like AEW. In all honesty, with the relationship between us the way it is, I'd like us to cut ties with them. Those are strong words. With what has been with AEW done for New Japan, really? If it was an even-handed relationship, that's one thing, but it's not. There's certainly a difference in terms of the money behind each company, but I don't see that as a reason to be so weak-willed. This is New Japan, damn it. Now, on the other hand, Okada has played a part in selling Tokyo Dome out. I have to admit to that. I'm sure that it isn't a New Japan wrestler facing Tanahashi in his last match, but there isn't anybody on the roster that has a connection to Tanahashi that Okada has, and I have to acknowledge that. And, you know, a lot of fans have talked about that for a while, the unevenness of the relationships that AEW has. Whether it's New Japan, it was also spotlighted a little bit more when it was with AAA. Things seem to be going better with CMLL.
I love the fact that they're going to have the show in New Jersey. Not sure if I'm going to it or not, though, but it doesn't look like it's going to sell out. Obviously, the last time that WWE was in New Jersey, by the way, this same venue, Cody Rhodes was on it. 8,000 tickets sold. This show, not quite 8,000.
Yeah, Trendon sort of, I think from like people not from New York, New Jersey area, there's like sort of like a misperception of like where it is and so on. I like sort of like they're like the New York area, and it's like
no, it's like Philly. It's like western part of New Jersey. It's more like Philly, or not Philly, but like, Pennsylvania. Yeah.
It's like when they had the Abu Dhabi submission wrestling championships there, which was totally weird. I was like, I got on the train. It was like an hour and 45 minutes later.
Yeah, exactly. It's not that close. Yeah.
So I don't know what their expectations are. I don't imagine it's that expensive a building, but it's quite a big one.
Yeah.
So they're over 1,000 tickets. So
yeah, that's great. That's great. So I saw about 1,200 tickets, which is good. But obviously, when you look at that arena, people might not realize it's actually, decent size, like mid-size, 8,000 or so if seats sold out.
Yeah, I think, I have no idea what their costs are or whatever, but I think at this point, anything close to 3,000 would be a win.
Yeah.
Under 2 would be kind of more than disappointing and so on. Obviously, between the two would be somewhat.
They got to start announcing guys for the show, though. They've announced nobody. So.
Yeah, that's like the weird thing where like they're still doing that, where they assume that there's this like buzz about New Japan and it'll carry through, but it's not going to happen. Even with things that are well known, like, and this isn't, but like G1 Climax type of thing, you have to like have a way to appeal to people, and it's hard with like Okada. Like, let's say even you got Okada to carry over, which he wouldn't do probably for these shows, like. The way he's being promoted on AEW, like, at least in my opinion, is kind of weird. And there's not like an aura to it or whatever it may be. He's making big money, but like, it's hard to like, sort of like recover the talent in a way, like if they've already been, under this like spotlight. So, it'll have to be mostly New Japan contracted wrestlers. And I don't know how many carry over at the moment.
So as far as TNA wrestling is concerned, what is going on? What's the latest with TNA?
So first, of course, the AMC shows, or the first AMC show. John, are you familiar with Perez Hilton?
I am, yes. But odd that he's going to be in wrestling. Very strange.
Wasn't it like
gossip guy, isn't he? Doesn't he do gossip and stuff? Yeah.
I feel like it was like 25 years ago that he like broke some big Britney Spears story or whatever. I didn't even realize like in the modern influencer era, like it was still a thing.
No clue. Yeah. I know who he is. But no clue like what he's been doing lately. It's weird.
Yeah. I think TNA did well with like a different influencer not so long ago. So maybe that's just part of their strategy. So I think by the time the show rolls around, it's not that far away as we record this, and certainly by the time you listen to this, depending on the platform, 1,765 tickets, 3,000 seats set up. So I think over two for this, they can set it up. Well, it's not exactly all to one side, so you'd have to darken some seats, but I think that'll look good and they'll be fine. But I think they'll find a way to fill it up more. 1896 for the Genesis show. Now, Tingley Coliseum, which I've talked about, looks like a cool venue, in Albuquerque, the following weeks, January 22nd has a 723 setup, and then the following day, a 676 setup.
So as far as ACW is concerned, the Awesome Championship Wrestling, what is going on with them? We haven't talked about that. I mean, we talk about them here and there, but we haven't given them a big focus like we're about to right now.
Yeah, and I would say, like, thematically, the next few topics are sort of like the idea that independent wrestling that has like at least one very ambitious show coming up or has just concluded one. So, of course, this was the certainly not infamous. I don't even know if anyone was that upset, but like Matt Cardona just signed with WWE. He was on the SmackDown a few days before, and he sent in a recording that he was giving up the belt, and then they just went from there. So certainly they've established themselves well at the Poughkeepsie in what was previously known as the Mid-Hudson Civic Center, now the Neshawat Convention Center. I had, right before the show, a ticket count of 120 remaining. They announced it is sold out. It looked sold out. So one way or another, they did quite well. They announced the return in March. And, you know, this is one of the best venues, certainly in the Northeast right now, to draw a crowd for independent wrestling. And it has been for, what is it now, John, like 25 years, you know, through Northeast Wrestling doing that. But it's interesting to look back, like how many shows did Matt Cardona mess up? So ACW, NWA had featured a video of his return. Juggalo Wrestling, he won the belt. Orange Crush, he was a headliner for that fundraiser. And Qatar Pro, I think he was the champion there.
What about Limitless? Crazy. They got MJF coming in for like autograph signing that may be more expensive than some WWE signings that I've seen.
$150. Hook will be wrestling as well. They're really going for it. As we've talked about for a few years now, they have their once a year show in the summer at the Coliseum, but now they're doing a winter show here. It's maybe 2/3 or 3/4, I think more than half of a house set up in this old-time hockey venue, which I love. 1,331 tickets, 1937 setup. The show is Friday the 16th, so that will still pick up. So really, you know, they have their roots and they're smartly bringing in two AEW wrestlers that would appeal more broadly. So they're really going for it. So it's something to watch.
What about maybe something we talk about not enough on the show? Hog.
Yeah. So as they continue to get more ambitious, and they're not doing so many shows all over the U.S., but they're all over the U.S. now, right? New York, Chicago, L.A. Typically, they do like a WrestleMania weekend show, maybe like an all in or all out, whatever it is, show around that time. So they're in LA at the Globe Theater, which had been a pretty popular venue for wrestling in the past. And then they're also coming back to the next big event in Long Island, you know, connected to the convention, which worked out really well for them last time, especially booking Mercedes Moné. So I don't know if they'll need another big draw this time or it just works out well for them. So that's something to watch. I would say one of the only independent wrestling promotions that's visible on this level in terms of booking a lot of well-known names that seems to be growing.
What is going on with the WWE Classic content? Because this was so controversial. People were so upset. Like, is it just going to be on YouTube? There's no more Peacock. And then, boom, it seems to be all popping up on Netflix. So what's the story with the WWE Classic content?
Yeah, no, it's interesting because it was sort of like they had like this carve out of stuff where it was, the classic stuff, and sort of what are they going to do with it? Like package it up and sell it to someone else. So like for years, what we had heard was that what were people really watching on Peacock was like, the most high profile events, WrestleManias and whatever. Now, for the most part in the US, Netflix is getting that as well. So that's a great engagement thing. But I think also smartly, like the niche stuff that I love, and I think you do, John, too, whether it's like outtakes of Andre the Giant trying to get into a car or something like that. Or Mr. Perfect Bowl. He didn't actually bowl a perfect game. That sort of thing. That's YouTube. So that's really smartly applied. But I am, again, continuing to be curious where the NXT stuff will go. I think, the smartest place for it would be the CW. I don't know if it would be just the CW app. That wouldn't make a lot of sense. But, if they wanted to carve out sort of like a Clash of the Champions type of thing, that would be on TBS where you have that occasional show. I didn't have the chance to look what was like the first PLE that was on Peacock for NXT instead of like airing on CW last year, but have to look at that calendar to see if it'll just air as like a branded show within the normal CW time slot, or if they'll end up doing something else with it.
Your favorite topic of all time, here and there. Break it down. What's going on here and there?
Yeah, so of course, a number of years ago now, John, right, there's the DiBiase allegations in Mississippi, related to, I think, $83 million of fraud. So they're actually building out their jury pool now. And there's a lot of like funny moments, I guess, relatively, if you can find humor in this. Mississippi Today had this snippet. 10 of roughly 80 potential jurors raised their hands in a downtown Jackson courtroom Tuesday when a federal judge asked, "How many professional wrestling fans do we have in here?" Juror 4 stood and responded to U.S. District Judge, "You want to ask me my favorite or something?" It was John Cena, a WWE star. "You're a youngster," Reeves joked. Others were fond of The Undertaker, The Spoiler, or Bruiser and Crusher, performers dating back to as early as the 60s. But nearly all called themselves former fans of the sport. They watched no longer. Too bloody and too violent. None of these answers were necessarily disqualifying, since each of the participants vowed that their affinity or lack thereof for athletic theater would not affect their impartiality as a juror in the criminal trial of retired WWE wrestler Teddy DiBiase Jr. Jury selection in the trial began Tuesday morning and lasted until 7 p.m. The federal government will begin presenting its case. And so I don't think, like, even if somebody was a WWE fan, that like they would want to like favor DiBiase Jr. Kind of what? I don't know, John, if there were like too many fans.
That's the thing too. It's like, I think everyone knows the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase. I don't know about Ted DiBiase Jr. as much. You know what I mean? Like, obviously he was in WWE, he was famous, but I feel like the $1 Million Man is like world renowned.
Was he part of that group where it was like the sons of type of thing?
But they were tying him into it. So I don't know if he knew about it or if he was, guilty by association or what, but it seems like the sons were more involved than he was.
Yeah. Speaking of fans and no longer fans or whatever, Masha Slamovich has her first match booked in the U.S. First was that announcement from the small promotion in Japan that that should be coming in several months. But Circle 6, which is really on the fringe, I guess you could say, in terms of violence and who they book and so on. So two forces collide inside Cell Block 6. No backing down, no playing nice, just violence and survival. Masha Slamovich versus Hallie J is about to steal the night. So interesting to see, how this unfolds, and if other promoters will book her and so on. ICW NHB is in jeopardy due to an ongoing lawsuit of a fan that, as it's been reported, a fan that slipped outside one of their venues. I couldn't find the actual case, even using the owner's Danny Demento's real name. So but he had wrote, take this however you'd like. If you are thinking of attending a ICW show or already attend the shows and enjoy them, buy tickets to shows left on the schedule for 2026. I'm sorry. But I think they also are going to Japan. So unless those are like funded shows, like if you don't have money, how are you buying tickets for Japan? But we'll see how that goes. Other brief snippets, MLW Chicago is sold out. IWR Seasons Beatings, in terms of the headline, it said draws thousands of wrestling fans. But then in the article, it said 1,200 fans. So that's over 1,000, but it's not thousands. And finally, OVW's current owner, Morley Sports Management, has acquired another property, not in wrestling, but in the, I guess you would call it like lower level football or soccer, as we Americans call it, Hamilton Academical Football Club. It's like to announce that Morley Sports Management has officially completed the takeover of 97.5% of the shares in the club from Seraph Zengin. So I don't know in terms of like synergy. One of the things OVW was promoting was to people in England that they could buy like a tour package and come over and tour Louisville and go to OVW and so on. So it's kind of hard to see how this all connects. It might all just be separate, but for people that were concerned about Morley Sports Management, how successful OVW is, there still is the ability to acquire something else.
All right, so we can wrap this bad boy up and head towards the plugs here. Lavie, follow me on Twitter and Instagram at 2manpowertrip. How about you?
Yeah, so first of all, a special thanks to our guest, Alison Lynn Miller, Rough House. I recommend the book. I very much enjoyed the read. First, I read it via an ebook, and then I read the print book. Great experience. Help us get to 150 members on LinkedIn, the business of the business. So we are growing there. Check us out on X, Lavie Marg. And if you're listening, you know the impact of our podcast and our professionalism. If you'd like to consider a sponsorship package that will cover the whole year, fully integrated sponsorship. We'll never embarrass your brand unless you want us to. Send me an email, laviemarg, LAVIEMARG, at lioncubjobsearch.com, or DMs are open on X. Find me on LinkedIn, and we'd love to work with you. Name of the game is money to keep us going and to justify our time away from our families in order to do something that we love and that we want to give to you.
Well said, Lavie. Thank you, everybody out there, for listening. We'll see you right back here next week for a little business of the business. We'll see you